How do declining systems systematically undermine the moral sense of wise women who stand outside of blood ties? How does unequal moral enforcement actually distort human intelligence itself? We're going to look at asymmetric responsibility, blood-bound loyalty, and the distortion of moral intelligence.
Welcome. Okay, let's dive right in. We're talking about a kind of decline that's really sneaky. It's not some big, loud collapse. Spiritual philosophy has been warning us about this for ages, and it often starts quietly, with this really dangerous kind of self-deception, which is exactly what this ancient verse from the Bhagavad Gita is getting at.
So what this verse is really telling us is that the rot doesn't start with some huge explosion. No, it's much quieter. It's an inversion, right? Where we start thinking we're wise, but we've actually lost our ability to see clearly. And you know where that shift often starts? It's when our world, our circle of who we care about, gets smaller and smaller.
And here's how that happens, according to the source material. It all kicks off when loyalty shrinks, right? It becomes all about blood ties. And then, well, things start to go sideways. Protection suddenly looks a lot like favoritism. Affection becomes an excuse to let people off the hook. You start judging people based on who they are to you, not what they do. And if you try to correct someone, whoa, that feels like a betrayal. The whole imbalanced mess gets preserved under this banner of family.
And this slide really gets to the heart of it. This isn't just a small shift. It leads to what the source calls the rules of imbalance. Think about that. It's a total spiritual distortion. The moral code stops being something that applies to everyone. Instead, it gets twisted and applied based on who you are in the system.
And look at this. It's just so clear. This is that spiritual distortion in action. Responsibility isn't shared. Not at all. It's systematically divided. On one side, often women, you have this demand for constant restraint, sacrifice, and clear judgment. But on the other side, the protected bloodline, they get a pass for excess, for indulgence, for basically going backward. It's a total double standard, and it becomes the very foundation of how things work.
So, you'd think a system would be grateful for people who sacrifice for it, right? I mean, that makes sense. But here's the paradox. In a system that's in decline, that sacrifice is actually resented. It's seen as a threat. And why? Well, it's because it comes from a place of wisdom that the system can't own. It can't control.
This resentment is a really big deal because it comes from a place of fear. That freely given care, that sacrifice, it does a few things that are incredibly threatening. First, it completely exposes the lie that you need to dominate people to have responsibility. Second, you can't control it, so the system loses its moral leverage. And maybe most powerful of all, it holds up a mirror and it forces the system to see an integrity that it just doesn't have.
So what happens when a system is faced with that reflection? Does it self-correct? Nope. It does the only thing a declining system knows how to do. It tries to discredit the person holding the mirror. It actually turns to abuse as a tool to cloud their conscience. It would rather shatter the mirror than dare to look at its own reflection. And this isn't just random anger. That resentment becomes a strategic weapon, a tool of disorientation. And who are the first targets? Well, it's often the very people who have that moral clarity but don't have the system's protection. These wise women, right? They're not shielded by family ties, but they are anchored in their own solid judgment.
And the way this abuse works is really insidious. It's spiritual. It's designed to break down their inner compass. They're forced to constantly justify themselves. The lines get blurred between what they're responsible for and what they're being blamed for. It's exhausting. And the ultimate goal? To mess with their conscience so much that their own wisdom starts to feel like something to be guilty about.
So, you see, it's not about controlling what they do. It's about breaking who they are on the inside. To really get this, the source gives us a story about a figure we can probably all recognize. It's the woman who carries history, not entitlement. So you have this woman whose strength has been forged in the fire, right? Through hardship and responsibility. But does the system value that? No. It repurposes it. It takes her resilience, all the things she's overcome, and twists it. It's reframed as a vulnerability, as something to be suspicious of.
And that confidence she's earned through all her experience, that's not seen as an asset anymore. It's a threat, a direct threat. Her independence gets mistaken for defiance. I mean, think about that. Her very survival is twisted into being some kind of character flaw.
So her moral sense, the very core of who she is put on trial again and again. Every decision, every action is scrutinized by people who just can't or won't see its clarity.
Okay, so the system can't understand her, it can't control her, so it puts her on trial. But what happens in the long run? What's the real outcome of all this?
This is where we get to a really cool concept called karmic intelligence. And it's not what you might think. It's not about punishment from on high. It's much more natural. It's about differentiation. It's a process, right? Over time, if you're aligned with what's true, you get more clarity. If you're misaligned, you get fragmentation, you get confusion. Simple as that. Yeah, so it's not some God coming down to intervene. It's just a natural consequence playing out. And the Source has this beautiful way of putting it. The life force of the system, its moral order, its Dharma, it doesn't put up a fight. It doesn't get into a big confrontation. It just withdraws. And it leaves behind an empty shell, a structure with no soul. So that moral life force just leaves, and you're left with a structure that has no conscience. But that is not the end of the story, not by a long shot, because the structure might fall apart, but that true wisdom, it endures. In fact, that's what carries the future.
And this really brings us to the core, powerful takeaway from the source material. These declining systems, they think they're destroying wise women, destroying wisdom itself, but they're not. They just don't have that power. What they do, what they really accomplish, is they just expose their own weakness. They show everyone their complete inability to even coexist with wisdom.
See, wisdom doesn't need to get in the ring and fight. It doesn't compete. It just remains. It's still there, long after the broken system has faded away.
So the moral order rebalances itself. But not with a bang, not with a big revolt. It happens through those quiet, inevitable outcomes. And that leaves us with this final thought from the Source to really chew on.